thank you for having me here at Techno Day. My name is Maria Korneeva, and the topic of my talk today is fake it till you make it, or how to mock backend responses in Angular application. So what is all about? Sometimes you just have to fake or mock backend responses, but why? You might not be willing to wait till the backend implementation is ready, so you just have this Swagger definition. Or maybe you don't want to wait for the test user to be prepared for you, because in my current project, for example, some changes might take up to a week to accomplish. But sometimes you are not even allowed to change some test users, or maybe the test user configuration or properties are so rare, you're not allowed to do so. And additionally, if you want to focus on front end, for example, in some tutorials or in proofs of concepts, you might just use some fake backend to concentrate on what really matters for you. Before we go dig deeper into the details, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Maria Korneeva. I most identify as a human being, and I work as a front-end technology lead at Aleri Solutions, a company based in Germany. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me via Twitter, LinkedIn, or email. But actually, it's not me standing in the focus of this presentation, but the mocked responses. So let's get straight to the options that we have. Today, I'm going to focus on the following options that we have. First of all, of course, you can hard code some values, or you can pretend that you load your faked data via AJAX requests and load them from a JSON file instead. For Angular, you can use an HttpInterceptor, which is an Angular-specific solution. Additionally, you can use an external library, for example, JSON Server, which is my favorite. And at the end of the talk, I'm going to focus on some more exotic solutions, something like state management snapshot or using some cookies or proxy configuration. Let's have a look at the code. So we will have a look at the hard-coded values or loading a JSON file via AJAX request. And for this, I prepared a small sample application, which looks like this. It just displays a table with some Bitcoin data because everyone is so crazy about Bitcoins right now. So I decided to take this as a sample data set. The application itself is quite small, so it just consists of one component and a service. As you can see here, we have the Bitcoin data and we display it in a table, and we get it through a pipe, and we use this Bitcoin market data service to fetch it. Here is the fetch Bitcoin data method, and as you can see, we're using HTTP client, request some information. So what if we want to mock this information? First of all, we can just write in the method return of some data that we want to return. And this is perfectly fine if your data is small, a couple of entries. But in our case, we have about 200 entries. So it's for the maintenance or readability reasons, it's better to store your data in a JSON file. Well, in this case, then you can import it just like this and return it as it's stated in this line. So I comment out the actual implementation, and we can use this one. After the application recompiles, you see that we are getting the fake Bitcoin data. Another option would be, oh, I forgot to. So now the application is recompiled. So you see, now we have the fake data. Another option would be, as I mentioned, to pretend as if we're loading the data via AJAX request. So for this, we can use the following option. We return our request and we use the HTTP client, and this is very similar to how we would request it normally from the real server. But instead of the backend API, we provide a path to the JSON file. And in here, make sure that Angular knows where to look for the data, or you inform where to look at for in Angular JSON file. Assets is the folder that Angular usually looks in, so you don't have to do anything special if you put your data in the assets folder. So the application recompile, you won't see any changes because this is the same file that we use here. So it's the same fake backend data that we are pretending to load. So in here, it comes even closer to the real implementation. So we can just swap the URL for the local file, and the rest is the same as in the real implementation. The advantage of this solution is also that your fake data or mock data is also under the version control. So all the developers will have the same data and can easily reproduce the bugs. However, these options also have some limitations. First of all, you only can mock the get method, but not the post method. Pretending that you load something by AJAX request is not available in all JavaScript frameworks, so you have to look if you have this option. You can change the path so that the file is no longer found, and then you will get a 404, which you can test for, but you cannot get 500 or any other 500 type errors from the servers, so it's not suitable for the testing of the error handling client side. And of course, it's a bit different. So you see that the implementation differs from the real one. So even the URL is a different one. So it's not quite as the real implementation. For this reason, let's have a look at the HTTP interceptor. This is a Angular specific solution. So basically, an HTTP interceptor is a specific type of Angular service which can, as the name says, intercept incoming or outgoing HTTP requests and even modify them. But if we can go even further, and we can also modify the responses. And if we can do so, we can actually use it as a fake backend. Let's have a look at the implementation. Let's pretend we have a second API request, which gives us the suggestions whether we should buy or sell our Bitcoins. The backend is not implemented yet, so we fake it in our interceptor. For this, we create a class, fake backend HTTP interceptor, which implements the interface HTTP interceptor. And to do so, we have to implement the method intercept. In here, we can delegate it to further methods. In our case, it's handle requests. We get the incoming requests as a parameter, and then we can start our selection process. So we can be quite selective in here. We can allow the fetch Bitcoin market data request, the first one, pass through without any modification. But if our API ends with suggestion, and if it's a get method, we can intercept it and replace and send out immediately our response. And here we can provide any response we would like, any body. So we have some more options for our mocked data for the fake backend. Since we have to provide this service, we have to add it in our module. So I will command it in. We'll recompile, and as you can see, our fake backend says we should buy Bitcoins. But as you can guess, each option has its limitations. So HTTP interceptor is no exception from this. We have to write some additional Angular logic for this, and it's quite error prone because we are all humans. We can forget to comment it out in the module, and then we will ship it to the test environment and then we won't reach the actual backend service. So to solve these limitations, or to overcome these limitations, I'd suggest to use JSON Server, which is actually my favorite option for faking backend. This is a small library which you can install using npm install, for example. And all you can do, you should do, is to create a folder which is called JSON Server Backend. You can name it whatever you want. And then you need to add 2 more files. The first one represents the database. So you can store all the data, all the mock data in here, which is again under the version control, so everyone has the same. And you have your server file. To configure your fake backend, you need at most 30 lines. In here you see even less, because some code is commented out. So you require the library, you create the server, you configure it to use your database, you configure some default middleware, and then you're good to go. So here you can say what sections of your database should be returned for which API. So if our application calls API suggestion, then we will get whatever is stated under suggestion. And for all the requests that start with V1, we will get Bitcoin market data. We start our server and it listens to 3000 port. The only missing part is that we need to specify when to proxy our requests to the fake backend and when to proxy them to the real one. For this, we need a proxy, and this is a simple JS file, which is placed at the root level. It looks like this. Proxy, you can name it whatever you want. And what I say here is that we use a default target, which is our test environment, for example. We have our APIs or our requests, which will be proxied. And if our process variable is set to true, if it's fake backend, then it will proceed to localhost 3000, which is our fake backend. And if it's not fake backend option, then it will be forwarded to the real backend. So with this, we have the freedom to decide whether we want to use the actual or the fake backend. Now we have to inform Angular that we want to use this proxy option. For this, in the standard Angular application, you have to look at the Angular JSON file. But since I'm using the NX standard, so I have a slightly different structure. So in here, you have to look into the project file in your application. So it's right here. And in the serve section, you had to add this part with the options where you say that you use the proxy file and you listen to the port 4200. All in all, it means that the Angular knows that that it should use the proxy, and the proxy says whenever fake backend variable is set, the request is redirected to the fake backend. Otherwise, it's redirected to the real one. The final missing part in here are those 2 lines of code. The first one says whenever we type npm run fake backend, it will just start the fake backend. Let's do this. The server is running. And the second one is more interesting. Here we can start our application with a fake backend option. So we set our variable to fake backend. So the proxy configuration knows that now we're going to redirect our proxies to fake backend. Before I start my application, I need to comment out my interceptor, because otherwise my request will be intercepted. So now I will start I will start my application, which is called fake backend, with this option fake backend. And I need to make sure that I'm actually making the original request. So I will double check in my service that I'm actually doing this, because otherwise we'll just get the mocked data. So now the application is running. I want my service to request the original data, but the proxy redirects it to the fake backend. So if I load it, and I need to provide the secure protocol, or pretend to. In here, you see that we are getting the fake data from the JSON server. So the advantage of this approach is that your code stays the same, so you can ignore all the commented out code. You don't have to change any logic. You don't have to change anything. You just control everything via the scripts that you use. So you have anytime the option to start your application with a real backend or with a fake one. But even this option, as you can guess, has a limitation, because it's one more additional dependency. So it's up to you to decide if it's worth it. In my personal opinion, it's quite useful to use a fake backend option with this JSON server. Now, as I promised, we will have a look at some more exotic solutions. In here, I'm going to talk about state management snapshot. We used this solution when we had to prepare or implement a quite extensive proof of concept for a client, with the main goal of user acceptance testing. So what we did was we used a state management library, in GXS in this case, which had the state snapshots. So actually, we implemented the whole additional UI and the whole management tool with an additional backend, so that we were able to store those snapshots and retrieve them back. So actually, this proof of concept consisted only of the front end, where you were able to retrieve the snapshots and to store them, so that you could share your test scenarios across browsers and with other colleagues. As I mentioned, this is quite an exotic way of mocking backend by storing the state that the application has. Its use case is quite limited, but if your premier goal is to test your application, or just let your users poke and see and play around with the application for the test purposes, that would be a valid solution. You don't need any backend for this. You can use the state management snapshot. However, as I mentioned, we built an additional backend to store our snapshots in there. So we basically built an additional backend to fake a backend. Well, as you can see, it's quite unique. Another option that you have is outside of the front-end application. I'm sure you have some separating layer between your front-end and back-end logic, for example, APIC, or some middleware, whatever. So we wrote a script which was looking at the cookies that our testers were setting in the browser. And if the path in the cookie was matching one of the requests to the backend service, this middleware was intercepting it and was sending back exactly the response that we were setting in the second cookie. So there were two cookies, the one with the path to the service, the second one with the desired response. And this way, our testers were able, without any coding, provoke any desired outcome. For example, well, gateway timeout or any other 500 error without tearing down the whole service. So that option was quite useful because anyone could use it, not only the developers, but also testers or managers. You can implement the same with proxies. So you could use some headers and use the header configuration to tell the proxy whether to proxy to the real backend or to return some mock responses that you configure. As you can see, there are many, many options. And you have the freedom to mock it. But the takeaway of this presentation is don't overfake it. So please bear in mind that whenever you decouple frontend and backend, you have the risk that your desired dreamy world, the mock responses are exactly the way you want them to look, but not what they actually are. And this can lead to some refactoring efforts afterwards when you discover that it doesn't fit. So use mocks wisely, fake it till you make it, but don't overfake it. Thank you for your attention. And as I said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ping me.